Hi guys, my name is Tensor and this is a channel update. So rather than working on a project today, we're going to be talking about the next languages that I want to cover on this channel. And yes, I know I've already made a channel update video, but this video is essentially just announcing that I will have a poll running for the next week or so to get your opinions on whatever languages that you're interested in. I know that many of you guys came to my channel because you were interested in one specific language, and while that might be completely true for a large percentage of you, I know that some of you might be interested in at least looking at one other language. First, we have Kotlin, and for those of you who don't know Kotlin, Kotlin focuses on null safety. It's essentially Java done correctly, or at least a modern Java done correctly. It's on the JVM, and you could even call it the Swift of the JVM because they're very similar. It has first-class Android support, and that's one of the reasons why this language is so exciting. Now, even if you're a Java veteran and you absolutely love Java and you really see no way that you would switch over to Kotlin, it's still worth looking at. It gives us semi-functional programming, it has some really nice reactive programming libraries, and it has a really nice small runtime despite running on top of the JVM, so it's not that much slower than Java. The next language that I'm seriously considering is Scala. So again, Scala is a bit like Kotlin in that it runs on the JVM, and it is a reimagining of Java. In Scala, everything kind of looks like an object, but the language itself is more functional than object-oriented. There is that dual paradigm that it has going on. It's a bit like other languages like Rust and Fsharp. They use the strengths of object-oriented programming with functional programming. And because it's a functional programming language, we have closures, higher-order functions, pattern matching, case classes, and an emphasis on immutability. Though, like with Rust, you can choose to have mutable variables as well. It is very good for back-end development and for data science because it interfaces really well with some of the systems like Kafka. Also, Scala has a nice concurrency model. It has a few libraries called Akka, which follow the actor model. So the next language that I'm seriously considering is Dart. And I know that a lot of people have a vast misunderstanding of the Dart programming language. They seem to think that Dart is essentially just a JavaScript replacement language. Dart has its own virtual machine called the Dart Virtual Machine. Dart is the language that you would get if you took Smalltalk, Java, and JavaScript and took all the good parts out of those languages and then put them together with other languages like Erlang and Go. It features optional static type, though I believe they're moving towards pushing strong mode, which is the full static type mode. It has really strong and nice tooling on Windows, Linux, and Mac. It may be object-oriented, but you can also do some pretty cool functional stuff with it. And its concurrency model is sort of modeled after Elixir, except it takes it a little bit further. So rather than just having an actor model, it has what is called an isolate model. And the way the isolates work is that they're essentially isolated heaps. So when you split off a bunch of actors, each of the actors has their own heaps in the memory. Next we have Fsharp, and Fsharp is an ML style language. It looks a bit like Elm and Haskell, though Fsharp is also not fully functional. So it does tend towards the functional side, I guess more than Scala does, but it still has some of the object-oriented features of its sister language, C#. So Fsharp is of course the .NET version of Rust and Scala, at least in my opinion, but it's also extremely cross-platform. Despite being a fairly statically typed language, Fsharp also has an interactive mode, which is essentially a REPL. And we also have things like partial functions, mutable and immutable variables, and we have full access to the .NET platform. The next choice is Clojure and Clojure's script. I'm putting these together, and I know that I already kind of did one video on Clojure, and that didn't really go over too well. But I think that if I approach it from the side of ClojureScript, people would be more interested. So Clojure is a list, and I know that turns people off immediately when they hear the word list. It has macros like any other list. It's a very small language, so it has very little runtime overhead. It has runtime polymorphism via multi-methods and protocols. It's fully functional. Most of the functions are immutable and composable. You also have features like transducers and monads and stuff like that. And it has a fantastic concurrency model via as software transactional memory. You really don't have to worry so much about the concurrency. Clojure just kind of does it for you. The final front runner language is ReasonML. This is a language that was developed by Facebook. They developed it specifically for React, and it is a compiled to JavaScript language. It uses an OCaml syntax instead of a JavaScript syntax. This means that it's also a functional language. It's statically typed. It can go anywhere that JavaScript goes, which means that you can put it on a mobile environment, you can put it on a desktop environment, and you can put it in the browser. It has full interoperability with JavaScript as well, which means that you can take a library that you've written in JavaScript and bring it into Reason without a problem. In fact, in the middle of a Reason module, you can start using JavaScript. So these 6 languages are the main front runner languages. They're the ones that I really want to cover at some point or another. That doesn't mean they're the only languages. There are 3 other languages that I have been considering for a little bit, but there are downsides to choosing these languages currently. The first one of these is Swift. It's an Apple language, which in my opinion is kind of a downside. It's very similar to Kotlin and to Scala in many ways. The thing that really stops me from putting Swift in the spotlight at this particular moment in time is the fact that it has a fairly bad development story on Windows. The tooling just isn't there yet, and while you can certainly run Swift on Windows and you can do it fairly hassle-free, there are moments where you will run into snags. And also because Swift is very similar to Kotlin, I feel like Kotlin is just a better choice at this point in time. The next language you guys may not have heard of that much, and it's called Crystal. The concept behind this language was to create a language that looks like Ruby or Elixir and is as fast as C. So Ruby's a fairly slow language, but the developer experience is pretty satisfactory. So the concept was to create a low-level language that uses Ruby's style syntax. It has some pretty nice features in it. It has null checks. It has static types. It also uses green thread concurrency. Because of what Crystal is trying to be, it has a lot of bindings directly into the C language. What stops me from doing Crystal is that, first of all, it's still being developed, it's relatively unknown, and it's not great on Windows. It would be better to let this language mature a little bit longer before we start doing full tutorials on it. That being said, the little bit that I have programmed in Crystal, I have really enjoyed. The final language that's sort of on the cusp for me is Julia. Julia is a data science language. It has dynamic types. It's a fast language. It also comes with Lisp-style macros. You can call Python and you can call C code from it. It uses a coroutine concurrency model, and it has things like user-defined types, code generation, and it was essentially designed for cloud computing and concurrency. Now, what stops me from choosing Julia is the fact that it is a data science first language. It doesn't mean that we can't build other types of apps in Julia. It just means that most of the apps that we do build would be focused on data science. I've created a straw poll so that you guys can vote on all these languages. If you choose one of the other languages like Swift, Crystal, or Julia, or any other language for that matter, just write it in like a comment box or on one of the social media platforms that we're on with this post so that I know what your other vote is for. And if you do choose other and maybe you don't see the language that you really want to see on this list, as long as it's not something like, say, Python or Ruby, something that you can find literally everywhere, it's probably a language that I will consider. So for instance, if you wanted to see Haskell, or if you wanted to see OCaml, or if you wanted to see, I don't know, Nim, it's certainly an idea that I would entertain if enough people were interested. I'm going to leave this straw poll link in the description box below, and I'll also put it on Facebook, Twitter, and Steemit. Well, I hope you have a good night.